Born to Build podcast.
So welcome to Born to Build, conversations with the builders, founders, and pioneers driving change from the ground up. My name is Sam, and today we're chatting with John Thomas. Now, John is actually my father-in-law, which is a real privilege. But John is also the founder of Living Hope, a faith-based organization based in Cape Town, which aims to bring hope and break despair in our communities in South Africa. So awesome to chat with you today, Dad. I've obviously witnessed and heard lots of these stories, but I've never actually had the chance to sit down with you and chat to you in this format. So it's really lovely to chat with you today.
Thank you, Sam. And it's really great to be with you and to be on Born to Build.
Take us to the very beginning. What was the spark that led to Living Hope being founded?
So I was for 30 years a pastor in this area, the southern suburbs of Cape Town. And I got a telephone call one day from the local nurse manager of the public hospital here. And she said, I want to call a few pastors together. I went there to the hospital and 3 of us showed up. And this is what she said. She said in the area of Masipumelele, which is a mile or so from our church building, that 44% of the people in the area were HIV positive. And God really used that stat to kick me to say, you're a pastor in the area, now do something about it. Now, I knew nothing about HIV and AIDS, but...
This was 99, right? So
November 99.
It was still, I guess, fairly new to everyone.
Relatively speaking, but I just, as a non-medical person, had never sort of investigated what it is. I just knew that it was a no-hope disease. At that stage, there were no free antiretrovirals, so it meant that everybody who contracted it was going to die, not if, but just when.
Wow.
And so we really felt a burden to get involved and to help people live with HIV and also prepare them for dying, because they were going to leave family and children behind them, and also they're going to meet the Lord. And so that's what prompted it.
Sure.
Years later, or 2 years later it was, when we were doing all the HIV and AIDS testing in the area, and University of Cape Town ran the stats for us, we discovered that then, 2002, the HIV positivity rate was 17%.
Oh, wow.
And so they told me, well, probably back in November 99, it was probably about 15%.
Okay.
Now, I think if I had heard 15%, I might have done nothing.
Right.
And so often, in life, something that can be a false statistic in my case can actually spurn a whole wonderful organization like Living Hope has become today. So even if you're starting a business and you get the facts a bit wrong at the beginning, you never know what might come out of it.
And as I say, like 87% of statistics are made up on the spot, aren't they? So apparently, they can help kickstart businesses or amazing organizations like Living Hope. Incredible story. 25 years later, i.e. today, you're doing all kinds of things: healthcare, substance abuse, agriculture, family. Was it always meant to be this broad, or did it lead from one thing to the other? How did that all develop?
No, Sam. It started with a very narrow focus, HIV and AIDS. Today it has 53 programs under 6 major headings: healthcare, substance abuse recovery, community response or disaster response, responding to the needs of the communities, particularly in disasters, family strengthening, life skills for children and adults, and then the final one of agricultural training. And we serve over 100,000 people a year. So it's grown from serving, just a couple of people. Trying to find HIV positive people back in the year 2000 when we launched was very difficult because of stigma, denial, and secrecy. And so we launched out with a little bit of faith and a great big God.
Amazing. And it's about 250 staff now in Cape Town, right? And then
It's about 230 in Cape Town and about 20 in the Eastern Cape.
Incredible.
And soon to be, I think, about 40 in the Free State.
Incredible. And I was incredibly privileged to join you guys in the Eastern Cape for the opening of that center in the Eastern Cape. Such an incredible story, that as well, in of itself. But we're still at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about those early days. Were there some unexpected challenges in those early days? Something that might have changed the trajectory later on? And yeah, what type of challenge do you have early on?
Well, I've already said, we launched out to help HIV positive people. We couldn't find one. Now, we've been told 44% of the people are HIV positive. And stigma, denial, and secrecy, which I've already mentioned, was massive. You have no idea how huge it was.
Yeah.
So it was a barrier to actually founding a community-based organization to respond to the need. An unexpected curveball. We didn't think that. We thought people would be falling over us to say, help me, help me, help me. Jeez. But everybody was keeping this a secret. And so we then started to work with children in school, in fact, to do education on HIV and AIDS. And we slowly started to make contact with HIV positive people.
Wow, that's amazing. Like to think, I guess we come in with our own preconceived ideas of how we're going to solve this thing, and then we get hit with this type of thing.
Yeah,
it's like,
and I'm sure that's the case with building any business.
Yeah.
You think this trajectory is going to go fine, but then you find all sorts of unexpected obstacles along the way. But yet, in our case, I felt we had a very clear mandate from the Lord to get involved in this. And so we stuck to the course. And we're, over the years, have been able to serve many people who've been HIV positive.
Amazing. And that hospice, the hospice that you started, is now no longer called a hospice, right? It's called a healthcare center. So, yeah, how did that work?
Well, we got that going in the year 2004, 2005 sort of financial year. And in our first year, 85% of our patients died because there were no free life-saving antiretrovirals. The next year, antiretrovirals came into this country, and about 85% of our patients lived. And today we probably have one patient a year who's HIV positive. It's instead been able, that part of it, which is one of the 53 programs, the healthcare center now cares for people in stroke recovery, post-operative recovery, heart attack recovery, and also terminal and palliative care.
Incredible. Let's talk a little bit about kind of structuring a multifaceted organization like this. It's obviously got so many moving parts. How do you go about structuring it so it doesn't actually collapse under its own weight? You've got so many different departments, and how do you structure that?
Well, very quickly, I realized that poverty was a root cause in causing HIV and AIDS. And I'm not going to go into all the dynamics of that. That would take the whole time we have together. And so very quickly, we realized in order to prevent HIV, we had to address issues around poverty. And the moment you start to delve into the whole scene of trying to bring people out of the despair of poverty, you have to tackle it in a multifaceted way.
Sure.
And so you can't just say, well, we'll have one job creation program and maybe that'll help people. Well, if you've got no food on the table, having one little job creation program doesn't help a whole community. And so we had to quickly diversify into dealing with the multi-causes that root and bind people into poverty.
And
And so to structure that, we found passionate people who wanted to serve the Lord and wanted to serve people. And for me, one of the key lessons about finding the right people in a business or in an organization is they must have passion for whatever they're doing. Because if they're basically just looking for a job to get a bit of money in, they actually don't become passionate about their work. And you need to have passionate people. And as soon as we had passionate people, mainly from the community, they started to open up other areas for us and tell their friends. And virtually for the first 2 years, every one of our people were volunteers that we had. In the second year of operation, we took on 5 full-time staff, which was a leap of faith, because we didn't have the funding to pay them. But for me, in talking to people, they'd say, oh, this is my real interest, my real passion. And I'd say, well, can you help us run with that?
So
And so
you got the vision, you get the job.
Exactly. So how
you
did
get the passion, you get the job.
Yeah. How did we get a multifaceted organization going? Well, scratching at the roots of poverty and finding the right people who had the right passion and the right fit. That was somewhat the challenging part. But I also need to say the Lord brought the right people along because we really felt we were on God's mission.
Yeah, and you mentioned mostly people from the local community that knew what the real issues were.
Yes.
And how to, I guess, be relevant in that context. You didn't come in with your own preconceived ideas. You humbly listened to the local people and
Exactly.
find out the needs through them.
Yeah, we started off with a group of volunteers from our church, but very quickly we involved folk from the community, because a fundamental law of community work is that you ask the community what the needs are. You don't come with your own preconceived ideas and say, this is what I'm going to solve. And I guess that's true in starting a business. You may have a preconceived idea about what the need is, but until you've sort of surveyed the community and discovered or the job sphere, until you've really dug into that, you need to find out the right needs and ask the right people. What are the real needs? Is there a need for this business or opportunity that I'm wanting to start?
Yeah. Now, there are just so many stories that I've heard over the years and even witnessed, and tell us a story about the other day. You were chatting with your grandkids actually, and you were telling them a story about buying the building for Living Hope. Tell us that story. I think it's very inspiring.
So we were 6 months into Living Hope, all volunteers. We had no need for a property, absolutely no need. And we're still battling to find HIV positive people to serve. I came back from a holiday, picked up the local newspaper and saw that the next day this particular property was going on auction. I phoned 4 church leaders and I said, could you meet me in my office tomorrow morning? And they did at 8 o'clock. And I said, look, this ideal piece of property has come up. But and they said, but John, what are you going to do with 5 acres? And I said, I really don't know, but its position is perfect. And they were very visionary leaders. And I guess getting visionary people around you in starting any business is important, who believe in your cause. They said, John, yeah, go to the auction. And they said to me, well, how much do you think it'll go for? So I said, well, I've already found a property developer and he thinks it'll go for about 1.4 million. This is back in 2000. And so I said, you know what? Why don't I go up to 700? Because that's half, but seven's a biblical number, and 100,000 is a biblical number. So why not I do that? So they said yes, and the one guy said whatever. So the auction started. I got the 300,000 bid. Another guy got a 400,000 bid, a 500,000, 600, and I got the 700 bid. Then I looked around and the auctioneer went like this, and I said 701, not going up on 100,000. And the auctioneer looked at the other man, fully expecting him to do 702 or 703 or something. And he just kept shaking his head, no. And gone, 701,000. Because I thought, I'll throw the 1,000 in back in those days if the church didn't want to go with that. Yeah. Well, I go up to the auctioneer and I must sign all these papers, and he says to me, 10% down now and my 5% commission, which was 105,000. I said to him, sir, I haven't got it. I haven't got a cent. So he said, well, didn't you listen to the terms that I read out? I said, yes, I sort of did, but I didn't really take them in. And I said, but sir, if you will give me 2 weeks, I promise you I will find the money. Now, because it was a church, in those days there was a nominee clause. I put the property, the bid, in my name or nominee. And so that I didn't incur the church into a liability, because I thought, well, I'm going to have to maybe sell my house and move here to this property. In fact, our daughter, your wife, was quite keen on it. She said, oh, Dad, let's go there, then I can get a horse. So, and I walked, I said to him, sir, give me 2 weeks and I will find the money. And I added this line, God will provide. And he looked at me cynically. And I walked out. The property developer was standing outside. He said, John, good deal, fantastic price. And I said, yeah, but I just found I had to pay the 105,000. And he looked at me and he said, John, my wife and I were talking the other night. We have done very well in business. And we said we need to do something for charity. He said, who do you want that check made out to?
Oh, wow.
And I said, wait, come with me. And walked back, and the auctioneer was still standing in the same place. I said, who do you want that check made out to me? He said, but I thought you had no money. I said, sir, 5 minutes ago I had no money, but I told you God would provide. And he did in 5 minutes. We went to the church on the Sunday. The church agreed to take it over. And within about 4.5 months, the church had come up with a balance for that money, and that property was bought cash.
Wow. Amazing.
So just a great story.
Amazing story. So cool. And yeah, there are lots more of these types of stories, but sadly we don't have the time for that. But I want to talk a little bit about leadership and culture. What were some of the leadership principles you leaned on most when building Living Hope?
Sam, I've never done one-day leadership training. I've never done a management course.
For yourself, that is.
For myself,
right.
Yes. And so I didn't know leadership principles. I came to a very small church. There were 37 people at our first service, 10 of whom were visitors for the day because the new pastor was being inducted. So the next week we were down to 27 people. And I guess I learned perseverance in a vision that you have. As we built the church, it grew. I've always worked on an inclusive type of model, not trying to do necessarily what I have always thought, but consulted widely, whether it was with church leaders or Living Hope trustees over time, always listened carefully to what other people say, and not just move with my own preconceived idea. And by listening carefully and building leaders around me, seeking to always act with absolute integrity and being open and honest about the challenges we're facing, if we are facing them at the time. I guess those would be the core things: openness to other people's ideas, consulting with people in the know, listening well, listening to the needs of the community, listening to what other leaders are saying. Living Hope grew dramatically, way beyond my wildest dreams. And in fact, the church gave, because it was a church-based outreach, gave me 2 days a week to focus my attention on Living Hope. And I ran Living Hope as a volunteer basically for 17 years. So it was an interesting journey seeking to empower others. God brought along the right people at the same time that we launched Living Hope. Medical professionals, HIV experts, the professor of HIV and AIDS at UCT came to our church on the day we launched Living Hope.
Nice.
And it was just incredible how the right people came around. So listened very carefully to what they had to say, because I knew nothing about it. All I knew is I had a passion to reach people and bring them hope.
Bringing hope and breaking despair.
And that's what Living Hope's tagline is: bringing hope, breaking despair of poverty, addiction, and disease.
Oh, incredible. And how do you said, Living Hope has grown at an incredible rate. How do you develop leadership within Living Hope?
I guess a lot of our people who have become leaders and managers of departments started off as unemployed people and started off as a volunteer in an unemployed situation. And we got to know them and trust them, and would send them on little leadership training courses. And so building leaders, I think, is about taking people with you and explaining the rationale behind what you're doing and why you're doing, and trusting people, letting them make a mistake here and there.
Sure.
And just walking through that journey, though amazingly enough, most people would come and say, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Are you okay with it? And we'd chat through it and maybe modify it a little bit. But there weren't many major setbacks or blopses along the way of people who were grateful for the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to be employed.
Sure. Amazing. I love what you said about trusting people, especially even though they might not deserve it yet, but actually trusting. And I guess there's an element of risk there, but it seems like it pays out dividends over time.
I have never been afraid of risk. And sometimes uncalculated risk, but I would get a peace in my heart that this is the right thing to do, and then move out and say, we're going to do this. And we'd all just lump in. And obviously growing a business where you're employing people is different to starting a community-based organization where you involve volunteers significantly.
Yeah.
But the principles are the same, of looking for people of integrity, people who share your vision, people who have a passion for your vision, and people who are willing to serve as you move into the unknown. Starting a business, might not go the way you think.
Yeah.
But those who are following or joining in the cause need to be willing to navigate uncharted waters with you.
Yeah. So I remember at the opening of Eastern Cape, of the center in the Eastern Cape, I think there was a lady there who originally, she now leads in as part of the Eastern Cape. She was originally part of Living Up right in the beginning, right?
Yes, she was one of the first 5 employees.
Wow.
A lady with halfway through high school education and now managing a very significant branch with about 20-something staff. And everything she's learnt on the ground. Wow. She came with no real knowledge. A clinic leader just showed her how to do an HIV test, and we sent her on an HIV counseling course. And that was her education into it.
Amazing.
And now she's managing staff and budgets and organizations and community relations, business relations, and building relationships with people around her. And so, but again, it's about trusting someone and walking a journey with them and growing them with you as you grow.
Yeah. It's not like at occasions you probably threw her in the deep end a little bit, but you're always there with her and people around her.
Yeah. And she always knew she could come back and say, what now?
Amazing. Can you share a moment that made you stop and think, well, this is actually working. We're really making a difference.
I'll share a story.
Love those.
One day, our chaplain was called to the same local hospital that I was called to visit a 14-year-old mother. This young girl had given birth the day before and was very depressed, and the lady, the nurse in charge of the ward, called our chaplain and said, please come and talk to this lady. And when she walked into the ward, the mother's name was behind her bed and the baby's name was above the crib next to the bed. And the baby's name in the local language was No Hope. And she startled for a moment and said, who named this child? Thinking perhaps some grandchild or some a grandparent, should I say, or some nursing staff member had named it. And this little girl said, I did. The 14-year-old mother. She said, why on earth would you name your child No Hope? And she said, well, it's like this. My mother died with AIDS, so I moved in with my auntie. She died with AIDS, and I had nobody. So some kind people down the road said to me, you can come and live with us. She said, I was 13, moved in, and the 16-year-old son said, girl, you will pay to stay here, and the way you pay to stay here is give me sex. She said, well, very soon I discovered I was pregnant. I went for a pregnant test, and they did an HIV test, and that came back positive. So I went back home, and I said to the guy who had made me pregnant, I've got HIV. And he said, girl, get out of this house. And she said, I never slept with anybody else. He was the only person. He said, you brought HIV into this house. And so she said, I was sort of thrown out onto the street, and another lady took me in who had 2 little girls sharing a double bed in a tiny shack. And she said to me, Tameka, the mother's name, you can stay here with us until our baby is born, until your baby is born. But then there's no place for 5 of us in a double bed. She said, my baby came prematurely yesterday and I've made no arrangements to go anywhere else. And in an extremely rare 1 in a half million case, her baby came out with full-blown AIDS. The baby had contracted AIDS in utero. Babies normally contract HIV in the birth canal. But this baby came out with skin sores. She said, I've got AIDS. My baby has got AIDS. Tomorrow, when I'm discharged, I have nowhere to go and no one who cares for me. I have no hope. You want to know why I named my baby No Hope? A chaplain called me as soon as she got back to the office and told me the story. I called somebody in the church. They said, yes, of course, Tameka can come stay with us. On the Sunday, people brought clothes, and soon we put Tameka into our jewelry making program, and Tameka was earning enough money to rent her own place. This was after a couple of months. And she attended an HIV positive support group at Living Hope. And she said to our chaplain after one support group, you people, and I quote her words, have shown me Jesus. Now please help me to make him mine too. And she led Tameka to the Lord. Tameka, 3 months later, walked in again and said, will somebody take me to Home Affairs? And if you're a South African listening to this, you'll know that this is where we register births and marriages and deaths. They said, why do you want to go to Home Affairs? She said, I want to change my baby's name. And they said, what do you want to change it to? And in her language, she said, the Lord, my hope. And so they took her to Home Affairs and she changed her baby's name to the Lord is my hope. Incredible. And that best tells the story of Living Hope. We seek to take people who have no hope and introduce them to Jesus, the living hope, so that they can say, the Lord is my hope. He's helped me to be gainfully employed. He's helped me to live with my illness. He's helped me to raise a child. And so was that a defining moment? It was for me, because I realized we'd helped somebody journey from no hope to being an independent mother journeying on life. And several years later, I saw Tameka. She used to come to our kids. I saw her baby, Liletu, and saw this healthy young little girl playing in our clubs.
Amazing.
And so it was a real special moment.
Or transformation. That's incredible. There are countless lives that have been changed. You mentioned 100,000 people being impacted by Living Hope in some way. Annually. And how have you seen communities that Living Hope serve change over time?
It's difficult to say in a community of 50,000 or something like that they have changed. One of the things that Living Hope faces every day is people come knocking on our doors every day in every branch that we have and saying, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And the question will be asked, why did you come here? And they will say, because we know Living Hope helps people whatever their situation is. So when a community speaks to say, go to Living Hope, they will help you, you know that the community has been impacted. We have seen little children who attended our clubs become our employees and grow and move into positions out of Living Hope where they have got really good jobs and some in excellent jobs. And they will say, Living Hope changed my life. And so we have seen many communities impacted. In 2020, there was a fire in Masiphumelele where 4,816 people were left homeless. 1,186 shacks burnt. The queue to get into Living Hope Gate was back a kilometer into Oudtshoorn. And people from all over the city and all over the world came and donated. And we were able to help 4,800 people get rehomed, not building their homes for them, but everything they needed in terms of putting them into their homes. And that was a whole massive section of the community. And a senior city council leader came to me sometime after that, and she said, I said in the city council that if we did not have Living Hope in our area, it would be a disaster. Now, that was mentioned at a city council meeting. And so I guess we have been able to impact many lives individually and see communities in dire poverty situation having some degree of hope and knowing where they can go for hope and help.
Now, making such an impact in a community is obviously going to come with some opposition, some skepticism, some misunderstandings. How do you navigate that?
You endeavor. You sit down and talk.
Okay.
When there is a misconception or a misunderstanding, and often that takes place in community, and I guess with business clients too, they think you're going to deliver XYZ product. Meanwhile, you're actually delivering STUV product. And talking and working through the perceptions. Again, listening. We've had many community meetings with community leaders. So I would say listening to people if they feel something has gone wrong that we were responsible for or may have been responsible for, hearing them, correcting it if we were wrong, or explaining where we were coming from and why that happened. And there have been very few situations that haven't been well resolved. In fact, right off the cuff, I can't think of any situation where people have gone away saying, you guys lied, or once they've understood the situation and what we undertook to do and what happened in the process, why it might have been slightly different, they have understood. And so again, with a client or a customer, keep talking to them, keep asking them, keep endeavoring with them, keep good communication. Don't think you alone have all the answers and that you know and understand the client or customer's needs.
Yeah, and knowing you, you came in with humility and coming in, not necessarily saying I've got all the answers, but I want to hear from you. I want to listen.
Yeah, I had no answers. I mean, I thought AIDS stood for abstinence is definitely safe. That's about as much as I knew about HIV and AIDS. So starting an HIV and AIDS organization with zero medical knowledge, zero support, but just knowing that this was the right step to take. We did suffer from a vacuum of, in business terms, product knowledge.
Let's look ahead a bit. I think your succession plans and story are quite remarkable and exemplary. The way you stepped down from leading the church, King of Kings, and then also later stepping down as Living Hope Director. Tell us more about your approach to succession planning.
I guess I've seen in life and ministry in particular, people and pastors who get into leadership and things go well, and then they get older and they think, well, I've been here 30 or 40 years, so I'm just going to stay here and more or less die here, and the church or the organization go downhill. So I came to serve in Fishhook when I was 30, and at 55, I said to the church, I'm going to give you 5 years notice. I'm going to retire when I'm 60. I finally retired when I was 60 and 1 day old, because that happened to be a Sunday, because I did not want to overstay my welcome. And I knew that younger leadership serves perhaps better than people who are older. I had not even stepped out of the church properly, because the Living Hope trustees knew that I was stepping out of the church, and they asked me to move into a full-time role at Living Hope. So I said, give me 3 months break. I want to just have time off, although I remained a volunteer busy at Living Hope. But I said to them, I will take this post for 5 years. Because again, I didn't want to be too old. And I do believe in younger leadership. I do believe the next generations and the younger generations are often very smart and can do things better. And so I deliberately stepped down and told the church, the church meeting 2 years before I was retiring. I told them I'm retiring. I had nurtured 3 pastors, and we asked the church, would you like to look within or look from the outside? And the church said, we'd like to look within. I then spoke to the 3, and one said, I'm not interested, and 2 said, possibly interested. So I said, I'm going to intentionally nurture you for the next 2 years. And one of the guys during that time said, you know what, I'm not a big church guy. I've come to realize that. Now you're nurturing me. I want to just be like a one-man church guy, one pastor. And so there was one successor left who was naturally nurtured into that post. At Living Hope, being a different organization, at that stage about 200 staff when I was retiring, or a year before I was to retire, I reminded the trustees, I said, I told you 4 years ago that I'm retiring in a year's time now, so you need to start a succession plan. And I found a book which was written originally for churches called Next, and I passed that around and said, you need to read this. And then at a trustee meeting, I said, I think it's time, the chair actually said it because we talked about it before, to put some names on the table. And that night, 9 names were put on the table. And to our very big surprise, our son's name was put on the table. And so I immediately said, well, then I need to withdraw. And so I withdrew entirely from the process of selection of my successor. In fact, they said to me that they basically at my request, do not sort of keep me informed. You make a decision without me and let me know once you've made a decision. And one night I got a phone call to say, out of 9 names, we got to 3. We grilled all 3. We interviewed them, and we have chosen your son to be the successor.
Amazing. Yeah.
I had nothing to do with that.
Wow. And Victor, your son, he was based in Canada at the time as well, and they have their own amazing story of how God led them back to South Africa. But but yeah, incredible how that also just worked out, and without you, I guess, with you pulling out as well. Again, very exemplary.
And then what we did with my successor, Victor, I remained executive director for 2 months after he arrived, and he just followed me and asked questions. And then after 2 months, I handed over to him formally, but he asked me to stay on another 2 months and to sort of follow him around and to comment on him. So we had a 4-month transition where he was nurtured into the role, so that the organization didn't feel one guy's gone and the next guy's come with no sort of knowledge. People had got to know him, and he still consults with me and says, what would you do in this situation, and so on. So,
amazing.
But I'm right out of all of the day-to-day operations. I go there and I see, oh, wow, this is happening.
Amazing. Let's bring this in for a landing. In 20 years' time, what do you think Living Hope will look like? And try to picture what it will look like, and speak to the people who are in Living Hope in 20 years' time. Hopefully they're still listening to podcasts then. And what would you like to tell them? What type of values, I guess, would you like to remain?
I guess in terms of what I trust it will look like, I would trust it would have spread across sub-Saharan Africa. No, not necessarily into every country, but taking what we have learned and applying it in a relevant way to those communities, because different culture groups will face different challenges. But there are many principles in healthcare and in substance abuse recovery and in life skills that are the same no matter the culture. And so there are many transferable issues or principles that would be easily transferable. And poverty is endemic in sub-Saharan Africa. So I believe there's a great future when you're helping people live and earn their way out of poverty. But what values would I like to see inculcated? The one thing we haven't spoken about, Sam, is
there are so many
vision.
Things we haven't spoken about. So many questions, but yes.
I have seen over the years faith-based organizations lose their faith-based motive. And I guess one of the classics that's known around the world is YMCA. Throughout America, it's basically a series of gyms, exercise places. It started off as the Young Men's Christian Association, and you can go and Google its founding statements, and it's to disciple young men and reach them for Christ or something like that. But it got lost on the way.
Right.
And over the years, it morphed into something else and doesn't exist in many places where it used to exist. And so when I wrote the Living Hope Constitution, I wrote into it that reaching people for Christ is a non-negotiable. And we put the church in as an overseer body, not as an organizational running body, but an overseer body to its mission and vision. And the church has rights if it believes that the Living Hope has lost its original vision to actually close down the organization. Now, it would close it down by appointing a new group of trustees and new staff members at the top of it. So there is built into the very Constitution, the foundational clause says this objective is irrevocable, and any attempt to tamper with this clause will result in the complete closure of Living Hope. So if the reaching people for Christ and bringing the hope of Jesus to people is lost, the church can replace that. If anybody tries to alter that clause, the organization closes, and all the assets have to be transferred to an organization with that vision.
Wow. So you've future-proofed the vision.
Exactly. And so the vision is stuck. And therefore, I would trust that the values that go with that, and we have a statement of values that define our vision, and those values are up in every building. And when people go through HR orientation, they learn the vision, the mission, and the values of the organization. And I get to still go and tell the history. And I'll always say to people, if you've come here for a job, you've come to the wrong place. But if you've come here with a call and vision on your life to carry out the Living Hope vision and values, you're in the right place. And so we seek to employ people who understand the vision, mission, and the values of the organization. They go through orientation for that, and they sign on that. So there's something to go back to if they lose that vision along the way. So holding people accountable to the vision of any organization is very important, and to the values of unity and integrity and transparency. And I don't have time to give you all the values, but any good business ethics will have those values.
Wow, amazing. So if you're listening in 20 years' time, remember the original story, the vision, the original vision. The Bible often talks about remember what God has done. If you're listening today, though, in present day, have you got any last words for people listening, trying to build something, trying to either build a business or an organization, maybe in a bit of a roundabout way? What's one thing you wish more people had people understood about building something like Living Hope or a business?
I would say be very sure of your vision and fairly confident of your ability, though most people would think they have the ability. But don't go into a business or starting an organization with a muddled vision to say, I think we're going to make a difference somehow or the other in this and this area. Be sure that you're ready to launch because it's clear in your own mind and with those you've consulted. I have seen several well-meaning people launch out into businesses that have collapsed because they have just jumped here and there and grabbed this opportunity because it seemed to have a bit of money, and then lost their way. Know your vision. Be aware of your abilities or inabilities and launch out in faith, trusting God to lead and guide you.
Wise words from John Thomas, the founder of Living Hope. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dad. What a privilege.
It's been wonderful to be with you, Sam. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
If you've enjoyed listening to Born to Build, please subscribe to the podcast and click the notification bell to get notified when the next episode is out.